Well, welcome to our early intervention echo. If you've not taken a minute, please put your name and contact information into chat. If you need to do closed captions, it is on your end that you can go to the more button and do closed captions for that. We do record the echo session, and that's why I do not turn on the closed captions because we close caption it at the end of the session so that we don't have multiple closed captions. We are recording this session. It's stored on our Canvas page as well as our YouTube channel that you're always free to go back and watch and review this. But also, if you don't wish to be recorded, that's where you can hit that big leave button and not join the session, which we hope you don't do. So please join us. If you've never joined an Echo session before, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. Echo is always a few components of it. The first one is a subject matter expert. Today, we're thrilled to have Shelby Clark talk to us about language development. And then we have a case presentation and go into small breakout groups to discuss that case. And that's where we can really build that professional networking and getting to know everybody on the call and who we can reach out to when we're struggling with some of the cases that we work with. We love participation, so if you have any questions or comments or anything that you would like to discuss, please put those into chat. Kurt Phillips, who is one of our hub members, monitors that chat for us and will make sure that your questions get answered. Leo Vasquez also will put in links and different things that we find as the presenter shares those. We also love case narratives. They're a great way to just solidify the information and also to get help with everybody on this call about clients or families or individuals that we work with when we get stuck. Sometimes doing early intervention, we feel like we're out here doing it on our own, but there's all this amazing people on the call that are willing to help and share ideas. So if you have a case that you would like help on or just want to discuss, please consider submitting a case. You can do that by reaching out to earlyecho@usu.edu and we will get you on the schedule. Just a reminder for some session etiquette, please remember to respect the presenter. So raise your hand or use chat to ask questions or to contribute. Please also remember to keep those questions brief and on topic. Virtually, we love to know who we are in this virtual world. So if you could introduce yourself before you ask that question, it again just helps us build up that professional networking. And we love having you turn on your camera. Again, it just helps us build that community and networking and know who's on the call. It also helps as a speaker to see faces rather than blank screens when you're presenting in a virtual world. We do talk about sensitive topics or clients and families that we are working with. So please remember to de-identify. Avoid using first, middle, and last names, where they work, where they live. If you're unsure of that, please reach out to a hub member. They have an asterisk or will now have an asterisk in front of their name so they are easier to find on chat. In order to get a credit of attendance, we ask that you fill out a survey. Throughout today's session, Tori will be dropping the survey link in there. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who fills those surveys out. It really is data that we share to our funders that we are able to keep these sessions free and share all of the amazing things that are going on. But that's how we email out certificate of attendance. We store everything on Canvas. So if you would like access to our Canvas page, please email us again at earlyecho@usu.edu and we will get you access to our Canvas page. We store the recordings, the presentations, resources that are shared with us, the case presentation, as well as all of the case recommendations. Sometimes we don't always have time to talk about all the recommendations, but you guys all come up with amazing things. So I would encourage you to check those out, because I know, like, if you're like me, some of the cases that we talk about, I have someone on my caseload that is like that, and I want to go and know how to support them. And so going back and reviewing those, they're on our Canvas page. Just another plug for case study, a case discussion, a topic, like whatever you want to call it to make it feel less stressful. We would love for you to submit that. And so again, just reach out to Early Echo at aggies.usu.edu and we will get you set up on that. We have social media, so if you've not taken a minute and followed us on social media, here are all of our tags and links. We share upcoming sessions, we share resources, we share tidbits. So if you would like to, follow us on social media. I'm thrilled today to have Shelby talk to us about language development, and so I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to her.
Okay. Can we see the right screen?
Yes, we can, Shelby.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. This will be all about language and speech and communication. So my name is Shelby Clark. I am a speech language pathologist for the Minot Infant Development Program in North Dakota. And I also serve as the Language Acquisition Project Coordinator for the North Dakota Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program. Okay, so why does a 9-month-old say ba 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 before they say ball? You don't have to answer it, don't put it in the chat, but really think about it for a minute. Why that sound pattern first? So while we're going through our slides today, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, so today we have 3 main goals. 1, understand the hierarchical nature of speech development, recognize why each stage matters for intervention planning, and identifying skills or lack thereof that warrant concern versus what a typical variation may look like. So whether you're an SLP like me, an OT, a PT, a developmental specialist, a social worker, really any other discipline, this information will help you kind of better understand what you're seeing and hearing in your visits and how we can all support speech and language. But it's also kind of, I presented it in a way that is easy to explain to families too, because sometimes that can be a struggle is, well, we're working on this, but the parents don't really understand why we're working on it. So today isn't about memorizing ages or checking boxes. It's about really understanding what the child's system is working on so our support can match the process and not the end goal or the outcome. So today we're going to build a house. Let's think about the process of building a house. We can't build a roof without walls, and we can't build walls without a foundation. So I'm going to use this house building metaphor throughout my presentation because I'm hoping that it kind of helps us understand how speech and language development works, but then also as a way to maybe explain it a little bit more easily for families. So speech and language development isn't random. It's predictable and hierarchical, just like construction. Each stage is literally building the foundation for the next stage. So a child who skips or struggles with an early stage will face challenges in later stages, just like a house with a cracked foundation will have problems in every wall that's built on top of it. All right, so let's build this house. Every strong house starts with a solid foundation. In communication, that foundation is built in the first 6 months before we ever hear babbling or words. The foundation is about reliable access to communication, social connection, and early practice with the tools they will use. So first we have the ground, which represents access, whether it's visual or auditory. The ground is where everything rests. So for children with typical hearing, solid ground comes from hearing speech sounds and environmental sounds incidentally throughout daily routines. For children who are deaf or hard of hearing, the ground is adapted a little bit. They need access to a language modality that they can perceive, whether it's spoken language through amplification or a signed language. So next we have the foundation footers or social communication. So foundation footers are the wide concrete pads at the very bottom of the foundation that anchor the house to the ground and keep it from sinking or shifting. And these are the social skills that make communication meaningful. So eye contact, joint attention, turn taking, responsiveness, you coo, the baby coos back. For a child who is deaf or hard of hearing, eye contact, visual attention, hand movements, and shared gestures replace those auditory cues. Overall, these social exchanges tell the brain that this connection is meaningful. Okay, next we build the foundation walls or motor development. So foundation walls are the structures that give shape and stability to the house. They're the motor systems that let a child practice basic movements of communication. So for spoken language, this involves that oral motor coordination, basically where you're coordinating breathing with voicing, exploring jaw, lip, and tongue movement, etc. Oral motor coordination is less crucial for signed languages, though still important for speech if using amplification for spoken language. For signed language, this involves manual motor coordination, so hand shape, movement, location, palm orientation. Whether it's via hands or via the mouth, the foundation walls need to be stable to support what comes above it. So this motor coordination, whether oral motor or manual motor, needs to be stable to support what comes next. Okay, once the foundation walls are up, we can pour that concrete slab. This is where early communication emerges and is practiced repeatedly. So for children with adequate hearing, we move from reflexive crying to cooing to simple vowel consonant patterns or babbling. For children who are deaf or hard of hearing, we move from early gestures to repeated gestures to intentional communication attempts. So these early repetitions, whether they're sounds or signs, lay those neural pathways in the brain the child will use for words, phrases, and more complex sentences down the road. So what happens if this foundation is weak? So auditory or visual access to a functional language combined with social interaction and motor coordination gives children that strong foundation needed for later communication. So if this foundation is weak, or if hearing, social engagement, or motor foundations are unstable, the walls and the roof will be shaky. So we don't see a delay now. We don't just see a delay now, we will see it at every level that's built above it. Okay, in between 6 and 10 months, we see the frame of the house go up. And this is where children begin practicing those repeatable communication patterns or the structures that words will later be built on. So for children using spoken language, this looks like babbling, which shows that they have some control over their vocal tract. For children using signed language, this may look like repeated hand movements, early signs, or consistent gesture patterns, depending on the child's access. So first we have the wall studs representing those motor patterns. Okay. So for spoken language, ba, 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 da, 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 ma, 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 these repetitive consonant vowel combinations are kind of like the vertical studs in a wall frame, where each ba or da or ma is one stud. And when we string them together, you kind of have that wall frame. In sign language, we see the same principle, but through the hands. Repeated hand shapes, movements, locations serve the same purpose, practicing one motor pattern over and over until it becomes stable. So next we have the cross bracing or varied motor transitions. So cross bracing is that diagonal support between the wall studs that stabilizes the frame and prevents it from twisting or collapsing. In spoken language, instead of the same ba, 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 we get maybe ba, da, ga, or buddy, or basically different sounds that are strung together. In sign, this might look like changes in hand shape, movement, or location within or across signs, eventually learning to transition smoothly between those motor patterns. So these movements or these transitions between motor skills are critical because they're stabilizing the frame. Essentially, they teach that system how to move from one position to another efficiently, which is really important for any kind of meaningful language. As the framing continues, children add more lumber and building materials, meaning they add more communicative units to their inventory. So for spoken language, the child maybe starts with b or d sounds and gradually adds more consonants. For sign language, the child may expand hand shapes, movements, and sign forms. Each new sound or hand movement is like another piece of lumber. A child with limited motor patterns has limited building materials. So a child with a wide inventory of motor patterns has a well-stocked construction site. Okay, and then next we add the roof trusses or prosody, intonation, and shape. So roof trusses are the triangular frameworks that sit on top of the walls and give the roof its shape and structure. Even during this framing stage, we start to see the shape of communication taking form. So for spoken language, babbling starts to sound like talking, where you've got that rising and falling pitch, the question-like intonation, statement-like patterns, etc. For sign language, we see that emergence of movement patterns that mirror the rhythm and flow of spoken conversations, where there's changes in speed and size of signs and facial expressions. The roof trusses don't hold up the walls, but they give the structure its shape. So whether through vocal prosody or visual gestural rhythm, the child is tuning into the melody and the structure of language, not just those individual units. So what happens if the framing is weak? So this stage is when three critical things happen, regardless of modality, whether it's spoken language or signed. You've got practice with those repeatable motor patterns, the increased motor stability, and then that improved timing and coordination of the motor patterns. So what happens if the framing is weak? Walls can't stand without studs. Words spoken or signed can't emerge without this kind of repetitive practice. So if the framing is weak, everything that follows will be unstable too. Okay, so now the house is really kind of taking shape. Between 10 and 14 months, we begin closing the structure in with walls. And these are the child's first meaningful words or signs. So first we have those exterior walls or first words. So mama, dada, ball, more, or early signs for people, actions, or needs. These are those outer walls that everyone can see. They're built using those materials that were practiced during the framing stage, and that repeated babble or sign pattern becomes a word when it's attached to meaning. So in spoken language, first words typically contain what I like to call the early 8 sounds. So we've got b, p, d, t, w. And why these sounds? Because they're motorically the simplest. So M, B, P, B, P just require bringing lips together. D, T, N, D, T, N, use the tongue tip to the ridge behind your teeth. And then W and H, W, N, H, require very minimal articulation or movement of oral structures. In sign language, early signs also follow patterns of motoric simplicity. We usually see larger, more visible movements, so they're easier to see and produce. Simple hand shapes, whether it's the flat hand, the fist, the pointing, rather than some of those more complex configurations. Signs made in high visibility locations, so near the face or the chest. And then those symmetrical movements where both hands are doing the same thing, because that's easier than some of those asymmetrical patterns. Basically, children choose forms that they can produce reliably for efficiency. Okay, next we have the interior support walls or receptive language. So the interior walls represent what I think is probably one of the most important skills, receptive language or understanding. So what's fascinating to me is that a child can understand 50 to 100 words, but may only be able to say or sign 10. Understanding language acts as the interior support walls. So we don't see it from the outside, but it holds up the whole structure. So without strong receptive language skills, expressive language, whether it's spoken or signed, will also be fragile. Okay, and then once those walls are up, those first walls are up, construction kind of accelerates and we start adding rooms or expanding our vocabulary. From 10 to 50 to 200 plus words or signs, or that language explosion, each new word or sign is like adding another room. You've got more space, more function, more ways to communicate. Some rooms get built quickly with some of those high frequency words like more, no, go, while others take some more time, like low frequency or motorically complex words. So now the house is enclosed with many functional spaces serving different communication needs. So at this stage, children are linking motor patterns to meaning. They start to use lexical selection, which is basically that cognitive process of choosing the right word to express a specific meaning or concept or idea. So while kids are developing language, lexical selection is influenced by what sounds or movements the child can produce. So if the inventory is limited, expressive vocabulary, spoken or signed, will be limited too, even if comprehension is strong. Okay, so let's go through an example using the house metaphor. So here's Maya. She's 15 months old and her parents are concerned because she has lots of different sounds, but says ba for ball, bottle, and bath. So let's think about Maya's house. Her foundation is solid. She's got adequate hearing, strong social engagement, and good oral motor skills. Her framing is strong. She babbles with lots of different consonants. And walls are going up because she's attempting words. But what's happening when we've got ba for ball, bottle, and bath, she's trying to build 3 different rooms or 3 different words at the same time, but she only has enough lumber right now to build them all the same way. She's using that ba as her building material for all 3. And this isn't concerning. This is that idea of knowing word meanings or knowing what a word means, and basically that receptive language developing more quickly than the motor skills, her motor skills for speech. So her brain knows that these are 3 different concepts, but her mouth can't yet produce all those different sounds, which falls within typical developmental variation as long as her system continues to expand. So our job is to honor her attempts, model the target words correctly, and know that as she gets more of those building materials, those 3 rooms will eventually differentiate. Okay, so next, typically between 18 and 36 months, we add the roof. So combinations, sentences, and more complex language. So the roof connects all the walls, it protects the interior and completes the basic structure. So we start with the roof deck or combining units. So the roof deck is that layer of plywood sheets that goes on top of the roof trusses. It creates that continuous surface that connects all the roof trusses together and provides a base for the shingles. So combining units, we've got more juice, mommy go, big dog, or 2 sign combinations serve as the roof deck. Those individual words and signs can now connect to each other. And this is where communication really starts working. All right, next we see the shingles or early sentences. So shingles are those overlapping pieces that finish the roof and make it functional. In communication, they represent those early sentences where words are layered together to express a complete thought clearly. As combinations grow longer, we see early sentences. In spoken and sign language, words overlap and build meaning together, just kind of like shingles do. After the shingles, we need the flashing and sealant or grammar and morphology. Flashing and sealant are those finishing details that close the small gaps in the roof so everything fits together correctly. And they represent the grammar and morphology. So for spoken language, this refers to things like plurals, tenses, article use, etc. And then for sign, this refers to verb agreements, facial markers, classifiers, facial grammar, facial expression, etc. Basically, these are those little details that help words and signs fit together correctly, grammatically. And then we work on the weatherproofing or intelligibility. So weatherproofing is how well the roof does its job, keeping out the rain and the wind. It represents intelligibility and clarity. So for spoken language, it means intelligibility or being understood by others. Speech becomes clearer and even more precise. We want toddlers to be 50% intelligible at age 2, which is a familiar listener, maybe parents, caregivers can understand 50% of what that 2-year-old says. At age 3, we want them 75% intelligible, and by age 4, 90 to 100% intelligible. So for sign language, It means clarity and consistency of form. That is, the signs are recognizable to fluent users. So this is the difference between, more using 2 fingers and more the correct way. If communication isn't understood, it really doesn't matter how big the house is. That is, how many words or signs they have, it won't function. Another part of intelligibility and clarity includes simplification. So during this weatherproofing period, children simplify. We see those phonological processes in spoken language, like cluster reduction, where it's poon for spoon, or final consonant deletion, ca for cat, and fronting, tat for cat. We also see simplifications in sign language, like simplified hand shapes and reduced movement complexity, kind of like more I just talked about. So these are considered temporary construction shortcuts, or the child's way of making communication easier while the roof is still under construction. So the key for us is to know when these simplifications should fade. Okay, so what happens if the roof is weak? So rain gets in. We might have some communication breakdowns happen. The interior gets damaged. We've got some frustration, behavior issues, social difficulties. There's holes in the roof, so we've got some missing grammatical morphemes, which let the weather in. So you can have beautiful walls or lots of words, but without a roof, that grammar and intelligibility, it's not necessarily livable. It's not functional. Language development continues for years after they age out of early intervention services. They're still adding those fixtures and finishing details of the house into their school age years. But once the roof is on, that is, once children can combine units to communicate ideas clearly, the basic structure is complete. So the real question, what happens when we try to skip stages? So working on complex sentences when a child maybe has only 20 words is like trying to put those shingles on the roof trusses with no walls underneath. So the roof has nothing to attach to and it collapses. Pushing first words when the child hasn't established babbling is like building walls on bare ground. They'll sink and crack and fail. A limited inventory, only a few sounds available, is like building with weak lumber. The structure will be unstable and limited in what it can support. So why each stage matters for intervention. You can't put a roof on a house that has no walls. You can't build walls on a house that has no foundation. But yet sometimes in early intervention, we're tempted to skip stages, mostly because parents come to us and say, I just want my child to talk in sentences. I just want them to talk. But if their child doesn't have words yet, we can't work on sentences. We have to build those earlier skills first. So when a child misses or struggles with a foundational stage, or when there's a crack in the foundation or weak framing, we see cascading effects throughout the entire structure. A child without a strong babbling repertoire has a limited inventory. A child with a limited inventory can only produce restricted word or sign approximations. A child who can only produce restricted word or sign approximations experiences frustration, and a child who experiences frustration may reduce communication attempts or shift to nonverbal strategies. So this is why understanding where in the process a child is struggling is so critical. So understanding the process of typical development helps us create appropriate targets and intervention. So we're not going to install chandeliers in a house when the walls aren't up yet, meaning we don't work on maybe the R sound, which is a more complex fixture, with a child who doesn't yet have the B sound or B, which is basic framing material. We don't push 3-word phrases when a child is still establishing single words. We meet them where they are in their construction and build from there. Okay, so let's walk through a couple mini cases and think about them in terms of our house metaphor. Where in the construction process is each child? Which part of their house needs support? So meet Jack. He's 8 months old, has typical hearing. Parents report that he's quiet, mostly produces vowel sounds, but no consonant vowel combinations. So let's think about his house. His foundation seems okay. He's got good hearing and social engagement and makes vowel sounds, but we're not hearing those ba, ba, ba consonant vowel combinations that should be emerging. So using the house metaphor, what is missing in Jack's construction? Anybody have any guesses? I can't see the chat.
Elise said studs. The framing studs.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So the framing, the wall studs aren't being built. So this matters because without the framing, we can't build walls later. And additionally, if we have an absence of babbling by the end of the first year, whether it's spoken or signed, that's a significant risk indicator. Excuse me. Research has shown that this is one of our most reliable early predictors of a language delay. So at 8 months, Jack is in that range of typical, but we still want to see some more emergence soon. So what should our intervention be focused on right now? We want to build the frame. So we want to increase that vocal play by giving him more opportunities to experiment with sounds. We want to model consonant vowel combinations and turn-taking games. And then also coach parents on how to create communication-rich environments. So with Jack, we're helping him gather the lumber and start building those wall studs. Okay. Now we move on to Sophie. She's 18 months old, great social communication, jargon speech, beautiful prosody and intonation, and has only 2 true words, mama and uh-oh. So let's think about Sophie's house. I should have tested this out earlier because I was gonna try a poll, but I'm not. So using our house metaphor, what's Sophie's main issue? Is it a foundation problem, missing walls, a roof problem, or all of the above?
So she needs to work on her roof problems, roof. Sounds like roof is your answer, Shelby.
Okay. All right. Well, we've got missing walls, which also is going to affect the roof. So she's got that framing with jargon and buried sounds. And she started on the roof structure, but she hasn't built the walls in between. So what does her jargon tell us? Her prosody is developing, so the roof. Her conversation structure is emerging, and phonation is strong. But By 18 months, we expect 20 to 50 words, and by 24 months, at least 50 words. So Sophie is way behind this trajectory. So what do we want to focus on with Sophie? We want to build those walls. So we need to shape her existing vocalizations into word approximations. So she has the lumber, the sounds in her jargon. We just need to help her build walls or meaningful words with it. We want to increase functional communication opportunities by creating reasons for her to communicate or tempting her to communicate. And then prioritizing functional words used in everyday routines. The more times she hears a word, the more likely it is that she's going to try to imitate it. And then we want to help the family recognize and reinforce those word attempts and not just jargon. So we're not necessarily tearing down her jargon, but we're using it as building material for the walls. Okay, so between Jack and Sophie, which child needs the most foundational work? That is the earliest stage of intervention.
We got to vote for Jack.
Perfect. Yep. Jack needs the most foundational work.
Jack. Yep.
So Sophie has more of those later stage problems, but her foundation and framing are solid. Whereas Jack needs the foundation and framing support first. This doesn't mean that he's worse off. It just means that for him, we have to start at an earlier stage, but both need intervention. Okay, so using the house metaphor, when do we need to call in the structural engineer, aka an SLP, versus when is something just typical construction variability? So keeping with the house metaphor, a structural emergency means stop and act now. A structural concern means proceed with caution and monitor closely. And a construction variance means a typical variation and keep building. So structural emergencies. So these are those serious structural problems that require immediate intervention. So no babbling or manual babbling by 12 months. The framing should be up by now. So if we don't have those studs or the babbling by 12 months, we can't wait any longer. For children with limited vocal babbling, there may be limited motor planning. For children using sign language, the absence of repeated manual patterns or manual babbling is equally concerning. No words or signs by 16 months. Walls should be going up by now, so no walls by 16 months is a huge concern, regardless of whether it's spoken or signed. No 2-word or 2-sign combinations by 24 months. So the roof deck should be laid. So if we have no combinations by 24 months, we need to take action. So not using 2-word or 2-sign combinations may lead to difficulty integrating meaning, but also might kind of clue us into some motor output difficulties. Okay, regression at any age. And this is outside of a temporary stressor or illness, because obviously we all know if there's a temporary stressor or change or illness, you're going to see a little bit of regression. But if parts of the house suddenly collapse, like losing words or communication patterns that were previously established, that's an emergency. Limited or no access to functional language. And this is mostly directed toward deaf and hard of hearing children, just because if a deaf or hard of hearing child has inconsistent access to either spoken language through appropriate amplification or sign language through fluent language models, the foundation itself is compromised. So without that accessible input, the entire structure is at risk. And this is also when we have a deaf or hard of hearing infant born to hearing parents, and they want to use sign language, they want to teach sign language, but they're also learning sign language while trying to teach the infant sign language. You don't have that fluent language model that we would hope to see. Okay, structural concerns. So these don't necessarily mean acting immediately, but we just need to watch carefully. So limited inventory and babbling or manual patterns. So if we only have 2 or 3 types of lumber, so consonants for spoken language or hand shapes and movements for sign language, we can't really build much variety. Difficulty with early motorically simple forms. So for spoken language, that's those early 8 sounds. For sign language, it's those simple hand shapes and large visible movements. And inconsistent production. So we're building the same room or producing the same word or sign differently every time. This suggests some motor planning difficulties, whether it's oral motor or manual motor. And then construction variances. So these are things people worry about, but they're actually just typical construction variations. So in spoken language, W for R substitutions are pretty typical until 7 or 8. And I consider these those fancy finishing fixtures, so we don't really install them until late in the construction. So that may sound like twuck for truck, or twacto for tractor, or wabbit for rabbit. It's cute and it's incorrect, but it's typical. Age-appropriate simplifications. So those temporary construction shortcuts are expected. So for spoken language, that's those phonological processes. For sign language, this includes hand-shape substitutions, movement reductions, or location shifts that are developmentally appropriate. And then accent and dialectical variations. Look at these as different architectural styles. And different architectural styles are not structural problems. So for spoken language, this includes regional accents. So kind of like, and I know a lot of people in North Dakota will be with me on this one. This is bag versus bag, or flag versus flag. It's produced differently, but it's the same word. We know what they're saying. So for sign language, this includes regional sign variations and different. Yes, Lee, I just saw your chat message. For sign language, this includes regional sign variations and different sign language dialects. So those cultural and linguistic differences do not equal a disorder. And then we've got the bilingual language mixing. So building 2 houses simultaneously with some shared materials isn't necessarily a delay or a disorder. It just, if we're learning 2 spoken language, 2 sign language, or both a spoken and a signed language, we're taking in 2 languages. So although it may look like a delay, we're actually taking in more than it looks like. Okay. And not all houses are built the same way. So some children follow alternative pathways, especially those neurodivergent learners. So for some, speech may not be the primary or earliest structure for functional communication. So for some children who have adequate hearing, sign language, AAC, or multimodal communication may be the most effective foundation for them. Differences in timing, sequencing, or modality don't automatically indicate a disorder. It just means their brain learns a little bit differently. Our goal is effective functional communication, not forcing one architectural style over another. Whoops. So understanding those typical development skills helps us recognize that difference between difference, delay, disorder. The hierarchy still matters. The motor, social, and perceptual foundations still support communication, but the final structure may look a little different. A deaf or hard of hearing child using ASL is building just as strong a house as a hearing child using spoken English. They're just using different materials and construction methods. So our job is to support that functional communication and access, not necessarily having them conform to all be the same. So some practical takeaways, whether you're an SLP or not, you're part of the construction crew. So here's how you can support building each child's communication house. So during your visits, here's what you notice. Quality and variety of communication patterns, not just quantity. So listen and look for, does this child have lots of different types of sounds for spoken language, or lots of different types of hand shapes and movements for sign language? Or are they using the same few over and over? Are they experimenting with varied vocalizations or varied manual patterns? And then we also want to notice their inventory. Can they use varied sounds for spoken language, varied sign forms for sign language, or are they limited? So a child with a robust inventory, whether verbally or manually, has more building materials to work with. And then functional communication versus clarity. We want to ask, is the child's house meeting their needs, even if it's not fancy? Can they make their wants and needs known, even if their articulation or manual production isn't perfect? Or are they frustrated because the structure isn't functional? For deaf and hard of hearing children, this also means asking, does this child have access to a language modality they can perceive and use effectively? So every discipline can help with construction, and let's go over some examples. Occupational therapists. So during feeding, you're developing oral motor skills for children working on spoken language. For all children, adding language into sensory play activities, vocalizations, gestures, signs, and fine motor development supports both speech articulation and sign formation. So essentially, OTs, you're strengthening the foundation and gathering those supplies. For physical therapists, speech requires coordinated breath support, whether you're working on blowing bubbles, sustaining sounds during movement, or building core strength, you're reinforcing that foundation for speech. Positioning and trunk stability matter for both speech production and sign production. A child needs that postural control and stability to have the fine motor control necessary for clear articulation. And then similarly for children using sign language, upper body strength and range of motion are essential. When you're working on that reaching, bilateral coordination, or shoulder strengthening, you're supporting that sign language development. Okay, for developmental specialists, early childhood special educators, etc., using playful communication routines during activities, whether it's a verbal routine like ready, set, go, or a sign routine, ready, set, go. for children using spoken language, sound play, songs, animal noises. For children using sign language, gesture play, early signs, visual communication games. And for all children, creating rich communication opportunities throughout the day. And then social workers, educating families on typical timelines and reducing that anxiety about developmental expectations, connecting families to resources, bringing in those specialist contractors when needed, supporting families in making informed decisions about communication modality and language access, and for deaf and hard of hearing children, or all children, advocating, whether it's for consistent language input through amplification, cochlear implants, fluent sign language models. You're helping families understand the building process and ensuring that they have the tools and the support they need. So think of the SLP as the structural engineer or lead contractor specializing in communication construction. So here's when and how to collaborate. So instead of something seems wrong, say I'm not noticing much babbling variety at 11 months, or she only has 15 words at 20 months. For more complex builds, for example, children with motor challenges, sensory issues, we can coordinate as a construction crew to address multiple structural needs simultaneously, which also leads to families don't need 12 different construction projects. So coordinate your activities so that we're building multiple skills at one time. Okay, so bottom line, you build a house from the ground up, not from the roof down. You can't really skip stages. Each level depends on the one below it. And when there's a structural problem, you repair it where it occurs. So we're not going to patch the roof if we have a crack in our foundation. Every child's house may look a little different, but all strong houses follow the same basic building sequence. Our job is to just figure out where the structure needs support and provide the right materials and expertise to strengthen it. So this house building analogy helps families understand why we sometimes target those basic skills when they just want their child to talk, why progress is sequential and takes time, why certain skills matter so much, even though they might not matter to them, and how they can help build at home. So when we understand that speech and language development is hierarchical and predictable, we can identify those concerns earlier, intervene more effectively, and better support children and families. And then when we understand that process of speech development, milestones stop being the goal. So why does a baby say ba, ba, ba before ball? Because we can't build those walls before putting up the framing. That ba, ba, ba is the framing, the wall studs being built. Ball is a finished room, and you can't build that until the framing is up. And ba, ba, ba is motorically simple and phonetically easy. And that's it. Any questions?
Wonderful.
Comments?
Thank you, Shelby. I will open it up to questions for a minute before we move on to our case. We're all clear as mud.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
Sweet.
A quick question.
Okay.
Okay, so I was just wondering what would cause a child to be able to say like three-word phrases, but I don't mention or I don't really see them imitating their parents or like doing those like basic skills. So they just kind of like skip to like just a few phrases. He says like it is broken or turn off the light or stuff like that. But those
So
are
some of those like scripts. You
Yes,
mean?
exactly. Yep.
And some kids, and this is a really big hot topic in the speech language pathology world, some kids are considered those Gestalt language processors, where they're actually learning language using those scripts or those small phrases, and then as they develop those phrases are broken down into words. So essentially, their brains are working from big to small, whereas most most children work from small to big. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, I would look into the Gestalt language processing, and I can send Janelle some handouts
Yeah,
regarding
that
that.
would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Again, those will be on our Canvas page. So if you want access to our Canvas page, reach out to us. There is also a question in chat. It says, are there any specific sounds that would be a red flag if the kid doesn't say them?
Um, I don't know that I would consider it a red flag. It would kind of be that idea of intelligibility is is not having that specific sound affecting their overall communication, or is it just they don't have the sound and people can understand everything else? Does that make sense? So it's not so much a sound issue, I would say at that point. It's more of a intelligibility. I think, yeah, I think if we've got a child who's not using a specific sound or not using lots of different sounds, we want to look at that oral motor coordination. Are they able to, move their mouth in different ways to make the different sounds?
Great.
I thought
Okay,
I saw another one.
oh, you did, because I was going to say, I'm going to wrap this up so we have enough time to discuss our case.
So, Leah, is Gestalt starting with a tiny house frame that's pre-built, then customizing? Yeah, kind of. If you want to use the house metaphor, it's essentially, yeah, you're starting with that frame that's already built and then customizing on the inside. So yeah, it's a good way
All
to put it. I'm going to use that.
right. Great. See all the
Thank
amazing
you.
things that happens on the call.
Thank you
you,
guys. You were great.
Shelby. All right. So, Emily, I'm going to ask you to come off mute so we can highlight you.
Hello.
Oh, why do I not see you? Start
I don't
talking
know.
again, Emily.
Okay. Hopefully you can find me.
There you are.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Takeaway for our case presentation. Do you want
Awesome.
me to share or are you going to share?
Yeah, if you would share, that would be great. I don't have it pulled up, so.
Okay.
Awesome. So my name is Emily Stewart. I work as a family support specialist in the Parents as Teachers program at Root for Kids. So we're in the southern Utah area. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit of background on this case. So I've been seeing this family as a family support specialist. I've been seeing this family since November, kind of on and off. They've had a lot of moving around and trying to get a hold of them and canceling and things. But for a couple months, I've been seeing them. We do in-home visits. The family is currently homeless, so we've been meeting at the library while they're trying to get into an apartment. Um, I think I put, yeah, a little bit later down. So they were staying in the homeless shelter. And just before Christmas, they were asked to leave. From what mom told me, it was kind of a combination of you've kind of stayed as long as we let people stay. And the little boy for this, we're gonna call him David. David's behavior, he he throws really big tantrums. He's throwing, he's hitting, yelling, flopping on the floor, those sorts of things, and he'll run off. So if he can get out the door, he'll get out the door and take off. And he had a couple times where he got out and the shelter asked them to go. So they're currently staying in a hotel that they work for. They're letting them have a room there while they're waiting for their apartment. So a little bit about David. He just turned 3 years old. Before he turned 3, he got just a couple months of early intervention for a language delay. He has a handful of words. I've really in our visits only heard him say like hi, no, uh-oh, stop. Just a couple of those little one-word phrases, not much more than that. We said mom reports that he struggles with really intense tantrums, throwing, yelling, running off, and he'll take a long time to calm down. So we get really upset and they kind of are on it for a while. These get worse when dad has to leave. And he has a little sister. So the family is mom, dad, and 1-year-old sister. And then mom also has an older child that's kind of grown up and out of the house. So for the majority of David's life, dad has been in and out of jail. He currently is doing outpatient rehab and has group therapies most days of the week. So this is where they see a lot of his tantrums happening is when dad has to leave to go to these therapies, he has a really big reaction. With dad leaving, mom reports that he listens better for dad. So then when dad's not there, um, mom says she struggles with him listening, struggles communicating with him, get him to, do what they need to do in the day. Mom also shared briefly that she has a court case coming up with a situation when David was younger where he got out of their house. She hasn't shared with me a lot of details, so I don't know about that, but I just know that that has been a recurring problem for a long time. And then another bit of background. So David was an early intervention and he's supposed to start Head Start soon, but they haven't gotten him in there yet. So the biggest areas of concern is helping mom with some co-regulation skills for David and teaching him kind of some of those being able to regulate himself while they're still working on language development because he can't do a lot of that communicating his needs and that leads to some of the frustration. And then to help the family have age-appropriate expectations for his skills, managing his emotions, so what realistically he should be doing, and interacting with younger sister. Mom has shared lots of things like, oh, we're working on him sharing with sister, and kind of some things that maybe aren't quite age-appropriate for him yet, but maybe starting to be. So some things that they want him to do in terms of interacting with his younger sister. I said the goals that we're working on is for David to co-regulate and start self-regulating when he's upset. The family wants less frequent and extreme tantrums, and then mom wants to be able to have some more skills to manage David when dad's not around. So when it's just her and the 2 kids. Some of their barriers is they have had a lot of housing instability and kind of family instability with dad being there and not there. They had a while where the kids were living with grandma, and so sometimes they'll be there for a day or two. So kind of that really instability of where they're living, who's present, and then some parenting inconsistency. She said it's really hard for her to not give in to tantrums, to kind of stay consistent with the rules and expectations for David, especially when they're just at different places. So some additional information. We've been working on dad kind of acknowledging David when he has to leave and verbalizing that he'll be back. So going over, talking to David, hey, I'm gonna go for a little while, I'll be back. And mom has noticed this has helped, instead of dad just trying to sneak out and leave. Mom is working on trying to make sure she follows through with what she says and the boundaries that she sets. So kind of being consistent about, I did say that this was not acceptable, or I did say that if this happened, we weren't going to the park, and following through. She also shared that she's focusing on how he interacts with his sister, working on kind of sharing and being able to play in the same space. Mom is feeling really frustrated about the situation. She shared that she says she's tried everything. So she's like, oh, I'm open to whatever. I feel like I've tried everything. So the questions that I had to discuss, so I wanted to know, what are some strategies the family can start implementing to teach regulation skills while he's learning language, and while they're trying to get into kind of a home and a routine, get some more of that stability. And then how can the family put boundaries in place to address things like running off, hitting, and throwing? And then how can I help mom have realistic expectations for David's behavior with his sister?
Well, Emily, thanks for sharing this case. I think it's going to be exciting because as you were describing it, I think that all of us could think of a family that is like this on our caseload. So we're going to go into breakout groups. Hub members, you do have the case questions that you're going to ask, and then we'll be bopping Emily in and out of each breakout room. So save your questions when she's in your breakout. We have to do that because if not, you guys all just ask a million questions and then we never get to any recommendations. So, Tori, go ahead and open those up. Welcome back. Do we have everybody?
I think we're getting there.
Okay. I know we are right at time, so we will not have time to go through any of the breakout groups ideas. So be sure to, if you want access to that, reach out to us about our Canvas page. If you will put the email, Tori or Leo, into the chat, that would be great, and just send those over. Emily, we will compile all of those and send those out to you after we get those. Next month, we are having, we're continuing on with our typical development series. So we will be talking about feeding next month. Our wonderful Kate Bennington is going to be talking to us about that. So thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.